Jomo Kenyatta, the surprising movie role he never wanted you to know about. Before the world knew him as the founding father of Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta, then known simply as Kamau wa Ngenji, took on a role that would quietly haunt his legacy, not in politics, not in academia, but in film. Yes, before he became the face of independence, Kenyatta stood silently in front of a British film crew, dressed in tribal furs, playing a supporting role in a movie he would never publicly acknowledge. It was 1935 in London, and Kenyatta, then a struggling student and activist, had no idea that his brief appearance in Sanders of the River would become a forgotten footnote in the story of his rise to power. London, 1934. The scholar, the activist, the actor? While studying anthropology under Bronislaw Malinowski at the London School of Economics, Kenyatta found himself surrounded by intellectuals, radicals, and freedom fighters from across the African diaspora. Among them was the legendary Paul Robeson, a towering African-American singer, actor, and activist. Robeson, cast as the lead in a British film set in colonial Nigeria, believed the project would honor African culture and asked Kenyatta to participate. It seemed like a harmless opportunity, a day's work, a few pounds, and a chance to contribute to a film that promised to portray African traditions with dignity. The scene that paid a guinea and cost a lifetime of silence. Kenyatta's role was small but symbolic. Between the 34th and 40th minute of the film, he appears on screen as a tribal chief, standing solemnly beside Robeson's character, Bosumbo. There are no lines, no dramatic gestures, just a stern expression and silent presence, enough to suggest loyalty to the colonial authorities. For this appearance, Kenyatta earned 1 guinea, a decent wage in 1935, and even gifted the director a silver cigarette case as a token of thanks. He believed he was part of something respectful, something progressive. He was wrong. The betrayal in the editing room. When Sanders of the River was finally released, it wasn't a celebration of African identity. It was colonial propaganda. The final version painted the British District Commissioner as a heroic civilizer and Africans as grateful, docile subjects. Even Robeson's character, originally written as a proud, educated African leader, was edited to appear submissive, almost childlike in his admiration of British rule. The opening title alone was enough to spark outrage, a dedication to the handful of white men whose everyday work is an unsung saga of courage and efficiency. Robeson was devastated. He tried unsuccessfully to buy back all copies of the film. Kenyatta, too, was furious, but instead of making noise, he made a choice. Silence. He never publicly mentioned the film again. It was as if it never happened. A role forgotten. A legacy remembered. Kenyatta's cameo was never listed in the film credits. No spotlight, no applause. Just a fleeting moment in a controversial movie that contradicted everything he stood for. As he returned to Kenya in 1946 and rose to lead the fight for independence, that film role faded into obscurity, overshadowed by decades of political leadership, rebellion, and nation-building. But for those who look closely, it remains a curious and uncomfortable chapter. The future president of Kenya, once a background character in a British film that glorified the very empire he would one day fight to dismantle. History's little secrets still matter. The story of Kenyatta's forgotten film role isn't just trivia. It's a reminder of how complex, surprising, and deeply human even the most iconic leaders can be. It shows us a young man navigating a foreign land, struggling financially, seeking to uplift his culture, only to be misled by a system he would later help overthrow. And perhaps that's why he never spoke of it, because that moment didn't define him, but it did shape the fire he carried into his fight for freedom. If you enjoyed this story and learned something new about Jomo Kenyatta that you've never heard before, hit that like button. It really helps more people find this kind of content. And if you're passionate about uncovering hidden chapters of African history, stories that surprise, inspire, and sometimes shock you, then subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more untold stories coming your way. Ones that don't make the textbooks, but definitely make history. Don't miss out. Subscribe now and join the journey.